Okay. So nice to meet you all, and so my today topic is also part of the Lojong, mind training. And maybe we, Lojong, mind training, or sometimes we translate it as a thought training. This have a two aspect. One part of the aspect is the something that we need to transform, that we have already within us, and transforming that. One is one part of the Lojong. Through that transformation, then what you kind of evolve. There's a something that transform. Basically, what we have to transform is our own self-grasping, or self-cherishing, or self-caring. Self-caring is maybe good. Self-cherishing becomes a little bit aggressive. Self-grasping becomes extremely aggressive. So usually Lojong, when we say, we all have a sense of self, and that sense of self fluctuates. Self-caring, kind of kind and gentle and reasonable. Then self-cherishing, it may have a more kind of like investment, more kind of focus. Then self-grasping kind of push away everybody and just kind of go through that. So Lojong is that kind of like a fluctuation, sense of self, that kind of like a changing, that from what you call these days, we have this technology, 0 to 100, goes so fast. From self-caring, that's have a gentleness, reasonable, karmically we deserve, to boom, to self-grasping. Goes so fast to self-grasping. In a 1 second, that speed limit of a grasping went to so fast. So now again, in the Lojong, the part of that is we all have a sense of self, sense of self. And what I think is a sense of self is almost like what you call the in house when you hold the temperatures. Thermostats. It's sense where it want to be. It kind of monitors. And I think our sense of self is, which really kind of regulates our cognitive function. How our thought engage, how our motivation generated, how we interacted, how we it have such as, so basically, like for example, self-caring, state of that kind of sense of self, cognitive mind are much more relaxed. Our cognitive state of mind is much more kind of like a clear. Our memory is much more clear. Our awareness is much more gentle. Now, when it goes to our sense of self into self-cherishing, maybe the awareness level is not that good. We just kind of like, it gets a little bit nervousness into the things that we have lots of more blind spots. And once our sense of self reach into the self-grasping, boom, now it's like it have so much blind spot into our cognitive function, cognitive engaging, the quality of our cognitive mind. So therefore, I think in the Lojong thought training, is one part of the Lojong thought training Usually we like to hear the other side, generating loving kindness, generating bodhicitta, in Tonglen practice. We go through that part, we're kind of like much more kind of like attractive. But there's like a hard work. There's a hard work how to able to get some level of a grounding of a sense of self, that not all the time getting from the self-caring to self-grasping, jumping to self, that kind of very basically almost like a self-grasping becomes the fundamental kind of like a controlling in how the sense of self-caring kind of like so Lojong, one part of the Lojong is lots of Lojong is the practice of a Lojong at the beginning, the step number one at the beginning, so much invested into the how to have a healthy sense of self-caring, almost able to abide. If we have a good sense of self-caring, then we have we have much more open of cherishing another living being. So therefore, Lojong is one part is like a basically, like a working with this kind of like a sense of self is a very, very important part of our existence, our identity, our what really motivates for us, what really creates the motivation, what sets which kind of motivation is all coming from the sense of self. I need to do my day productive. I want to concentrate.
Whoa, what was that?
I don't know.
Transformer, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One part of the Lojong. Whoa, this is a. Yes.
But you may be on different.
No, I saw smoke going. Something happened there.
Wow.
Inside. Outside.
Outside,
Far,
okay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's winter then.
Okay.
That's good.
My self-grasping got really 0 to 100.
Yeah, very fast.
Somehow I didn't understand.
Okay, so basically, that's I think the Lojong part is like okay, now how in the Lojong training, I think this is a really I think part of the how we, for example, if we want to do Shine meditation, I think of course focus and how to avoid, how to kind of distance from the distractions and how to cultivate concentration is at the beginning, if we have our own sense of self is much more grounded and much more kind of content. And then I think it's naturally going into the concentration practice. And naturally it have a kind of not by force, not by distancing, by naturally kind of is overcome from the distractions. If we don't have some certain extent naturally kind of distant from the distraction, and there's a naturally openness I say opportunity or the conditions to concentration, I think making effort makes worse. So therefore I think so basically in a sense of self, how we hold our own self, that is the kind of like the fundamental. So in a Lojong training is basically there is two angle. One is the angle from the method angle, how to work with a sense of self. And one is from the wisdom angle, how to work with a sense of self. Okay, so the training basically, our meditation practice, our day-to-day basis, how to kind of like generate it, that kind of like a very kind of like a self-caring, self-compassion, almost like a self-caring and self-compassion. Not so much self-cherishing. This is, for me, this is a lot of the word self-cherishing is in the Tibetan literature, in the Lojong literature, all the time. The minute we say self-cherishing, it have a little bit negative connotation. In English, word cherishing is a positive. Self-cherishing. What do you think? Is more positive or?
If you say cherish, it can be good, but if you say self-cherishing in Buddhist context, maybe not good.
Good, but general in a Western culture.
It's good, yeah.
Self-cherishing.
Oh, self-cherishing. I don't know. I don't really hear this term.
Okay. Okay. Cherishing. And where you use the cherishing word?
Cherish your family and your friends and your country and all kinds of,
Cherishing have a more out of yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's okay. Then if cherishing it's have like a more positive, because cherishing is kind of naturally kind of like you cherish some other people. But the minute we say self-cherishing, it becomes kind of opposite of that. Becomes more self-focused. Okay, so that's good. So self-cherishing, cherishing word is a beautiful. So self-cherishing, cherishing, self-caring. Self-caring as a considered as a good, no? Self-caring. Okay. So anyway, I think that fundamentally, in a Buddha's teaching, not knowing the nature of a self, or misunderstanding of the nature of a self is a source of all the kind of like ups and downs in our life, even within the 24 hour. Our sense of self, even that much more kind of equanimity in a neutral state can bring also lots of calm and peace in the state of our thoughts and our mind. Once our sense of self is so ungrounded, then I think this kind of like a thought getting so reactive is basically it doesn't have any kind of like a home or vehicle to grounding, because sense of self is like almost like so much into kind of like so going to the sense of self, usually our sense of self is pretty much tied with anxiety, or pretty much sense of self tied with disappointment. Sense of self is sense of self is so much either related with the future, or sense of self either related with the past. Somehow sense of self never able to be in the present. Let me put that way. Our emotional connection is almost like either what's the next or what happened in the past. There's a very much little time into kind of like energetically or fully present into sense of self, in the now. I think, so here I think this kind of like a teaching of a present moment, being in a present moment. Being in a present moment, what means that? You're trying to bring your mind in the present moment. Mind will say, let's try, let's play that game. So I think when we say meditate in being in a present moment, I think we have to relax sense of self. I feel that's way we hold the self. The more you hold, you're tight to yourself, perfect environment to go to the future or the past. sense of self, day-to-day basis, sense of self somehow we hold with a kind of very middle way or neutral, more kind of like a gentle sense of self you carry into that. Then when we say meditate in present moment, it's more natural because there is no internally, kind of squeezing to past and future. So I think sense of self is now here the ego grasping or egotistical self-cherishing is a constantly pushing out. It's just kind of like a kind of almost like a pulling. Basically self-grasping and egotistical self-cherishing. It's kind of like it have lots of egotistical self-cherishing or egotistical self-grasping have a kind of like a one common ingredient into that feeling is a fear is there. Again, maybe sense of self for us, sense of self for us generally, maybe much more kind of company with a fear all the time. Majority maybe is something related with a fear. Majority is something related with a kind of like a uncertainty. Something that maybe sense of self almost wants to be kind of like a sense of self, kind of like a company with a kind of to control, to kind of. And I think the stress and the paranoia and fear comes, sense of self all the time wants to be controlled, to be everything as it sees, and that's the way there's like uncertainty in the reality. Maybe that's the way the anxiety, not able to kind of like a sense of self, kind of like a be and willing to adapt whatever comes in the future, is all the time it's kind of like a. In a way, yes, we want to have a kind of like a predictable, as much possible, but again, when we go that over, it's kind of creates sense of self, have a much more tension. How we can relax, unpredictable future, as like allowing whatever comes into the present, able to adapt and transform, rather than kind of like a fixating. So again, sense of self, basically how to unleash sense of self with the courage, like a kind of sense of self, like kind of like a maybe we have sense of self lots more tied down, almost like a tied down. So anyway, the key point over here is when we're doing meditation, if we want to do meditation or even a simple breathing meditation, first we need to feel sense of self to relax, sense of self related with our physical, sense of self related with our emotion, sense of self, this all layers kind of like have to kind of before some level of a kind of like a eased. So therefore, sometimes I feel like if you're doing meditation practice, the practice of yoga, I think is a really good and important. It's an element it makes very suitable. So sense of self there's a layers of a connection with our own existence of our aggregate. So therefore. That kind of way to not immediately trying to get concentration, not immediately trying to go into the meditation in loving kindness, without doing some kind of basic homework of our own self, kind of way to kind of just to sense of self trying to kind of bringing into the present moment. So what that means, sense of self in the present moment, basically intentionally kind of sense of self some sense of self intentionally trying to let go with the past and future. So basically, every day we are with a sense of self. Every day we are with this sense of I. We are with this, and this is a kind of like a main battery. This is the main energy source. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to share the last week feeling a lot of stress, and this sense of self is, I need to do this, will this work out, the anxiety, and also a lot of fatigue from all this kind of stress. And so I forced myself to, right before sunset, go out on the lake and go paddling. And then I forget everything, just right in the moment. The waves are coming and splashing my face, the wind through my hair. No thoughts. And so whether it's that or just taking a walk or getting away from your computer, yoga, we need to do something every day just to clear away all the ego-based thinking.
Yeah, I think that break is that just by that breaking momentum of that kind of unhealthy sense of self is bringing tension, just cutting that flow of that momentum, just by paddling, just getting out, is a really, these things are really, really important. Once we are in a cart into the wave, once the aeroplane's in the turbulence, main thing is slow down the engine, not trying to speeding. So, just kind of slowing down. So just kind of taking a break. So that's, I think, that's kind of like the fundamental. So again, I think the key thing is sometimes I feel like we need, all these things, sense of self that we need to find, if, again, the reactive thought, who is the, chicken and egg? If the reactive thought makes a sense of self unhealthy, or unhealthy sense of self makes a reactive thoughts, they are kind of they feed each other, absolutely. But from the Buddhist literature, philosophical point of view, ultimately, this kind of ignorant or misunderstanding of the nature of a self, the I, which really create the reactive thought. But we as an individual person, we are capability to manage multi-thoughts. And the meditator particularly have to be a kind of a skilled, equipped to hold multi-thoughts. And even advanced meditation is multi-thoughts, multi-wisdoms. It is so my point over here is going back to the point in a lojong, in a mind training. In a lojong mind training, the one part of the thing is working with a sense of self from the method angle, and at one point is working a sense of self from the wisdom perspective. Okay, and a sense of self working with from the method point of view is the method point of view working with a sense of self is we need to. Usually what happens is related with the sense of self. We say I am only suffering, everybody looks like a good. There's a judgmental. There's lots of judgmental. Something that's mind is everybody seems working well, and there's this kind of mind that comparison. There's that kind of unequanimity mind. Okay, so. That's the one part. Is another part is that there's such a strong focus into the self. So from the method point of view, how we work with the sense of self is basically one method is of course, you're overwhelmed with your own life and the situations and challenge. And then one method is just kind of like a shifting that into the more bigger situations. And you becomes trying to see like relativeness. Then you're kind of like, this is a one method, just shifting your focus. Instead of just focusing into the self, then you see, there's so many people even not clean drinking water. I have, simple shifting. That is a one method, and another method is not so much comparison, but trying to seeing in a fundamentally kind of equanimity. Myself and another, we all kind of like in a same kind of like a journey, same equanimity, same wish, kind of like there's no, so our sense of self is kind of like from one point of view is very sad, all the time comparison, like kind of like a comparison. So here, from the method point of view, equanimity meditation. Same. We all are same. We all are same. A little bit due to karmic reason. Some. For me, they say Tulku Rinpoche. I'm not. I would recommend don't become Rinpoche. I would recommend if people tell you to become Rinpoche, say no. Better to say no. I think, Rinpoches have to work so hard. No, I remember one time when I was in the monastery and the teacher, I'm also studied, another student where. And this teacher asked this young student, do you want to become Rinpoche? And then he kind of looked at me and he thought a lot, reflected. And then this teacher, he said, like, as you become Rinpoche, will treat you good, blah, blah. And he went through all the, because he noticed he's not exactly sure. So he's trying to convince him. But regardless how much he's trying to convince it, at the end he said, no, I don't want to, because he saw me, no time to play and studying hard. He said, no.
Isn't Rinpoche like if you want to become Rinpoche, you could become Rinpoche?
No. If people tell you you want to recognize you as a true guru, I'll recommending say no, thank you. Okay, so anyway. Due to karma, maybe there is some difference, but in the equanimity meditation, basically what I'm saying is equanimity meditation is one thing that I think if we notice our sense of self getting kind of ungrounded, really kind of tense, or that affecting our cognitive function, that affecting our memory, things get kind of like all over. So in such a case, how we can be grounded our own self is a meditation of equanimity. Kind of like you're shifting your focus not only into the self, but you're kind of like a more broad, more wider awareness, and then really not getting into the comparison kind of things, and just trying to view into the equanimity practice. That's, I think, like one thing is a very, very healthy equanimity practice, because sense of self, we are all the time kind of, it have some level of a paranoia, and again also like a evening when you go to your bed, and also somehow at the end your world start through the sense of self, you emanate your world through the sense of self, and in end of the day you need to dissolve your world into the sense of self, and that sense of self if we're able to do emanate our life and the world through the equanimity sense of self. Beautiful. fluctuation happens, but doesn't matter. The foundation is very healthy. End of the day, you're dissolving your life and your day into the equanimity of a sense of self, not into that kind of fight mode and anxiety mode of a sense of self. And that becomes kind of like a way so equanimity meditation is, I will say, like you start your day through the state of equanimity, sense of self. You dissolve and a kind of like a close your day into some level of a meditation of equanimity of a sense of self. Equanimity of a sense of self, basically you're shifting, not putting all the focus into the self. You're kind of expanding, feeling everybody's sense of self, having a same wish, same journey, same challenge, not any kind of competition mode, kind of dropping that. So that's, I think, is a really, really important kind of way to relax and kind of like accepting. Okay. Now, equanimity meditation, from the method point of view, how we do with how we kind of like that kind of exercise will becomes very, very healthy into this, sense of self, never getting any kind of like a healthy, clean air or healthy air. It becomes naturally so polluted, so therefore equanimity meditation also like a very, very important. Then another one is from the wisdom perspective. Now over here, from wisdom perspective, healthy sense of self, I think is in a wisdom perspective, that is a little bit more kind of like a complex. What is a healthy sense of self is there's no way to pin down or construct sense of self, even in the feeling level, even into the conceptual level, even in our thought level, not having that kind of like a tightness or kind of like a constructiveness, but kind of like a flow of energy, flow of a kind of sense of self as a flow of our life, flow of our, and then basically that kind of like a flow happened. We need to kind of like a release or dissolve that kind of like a concreteness or solidness of a sense of self. So therefore, I think over here, with the meditation of so-called meditation of emptiness, emptiness is the in maybe like anyway, in emptiness, if we see the emptiness of self, sometimes I feel emptiness is, sometimes you draw the you emphasize more into the negatives, I say, the absent side, and then you see the actual picture, what you call that. Sometimes you have you see the real picture from the other side. The emphasis is more into what is the not. What is the not the actual face? It is emphasizing into that. Somehow you see the real picture of the face. So I think sometimes I feel like meditation and emptiness is something like somehow you're coming through what is the not reality and see the reality. So sometimes you're drawing have that, painting have that. You paint much the dark side, and then you see the.
Do Ruby's
background,
Ruby's
kinda?
part, or like a woman's face, and
Yeah, exactly. Human face. Usually you do human. It's not like.
like a part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like
So focus.
illusion picture. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not shadow. It's just like you just draw. You painted which is not the face, and by painting that, it shows what is the face.
One
The
side,
silhouette.
One side.
part, and one
Silhouette.
side, yeah. The Ruby's part was separate there.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, separate. Illusion test or something.
Okay. So anyway, from the wisdom perspective, what means healthy? How we define healthy. From the method point of view, healthy is something that have a focus is not only into the self but the inclusive self, all sentient beings, as much expansion. So that one is and on top of that you have emotionally there's a sense of like connectiveness from the everybody have same kind of like not comparison. Usually we have included some kind of another self, somebody's self, then you have a kind of like a comparison, or it's have a basically affliction kind of more tendency. So kind of inclusive, inviting all self, but connected through the equanimity emotion rather than afflicted emotion. Usually the minute you invite it, it have a kind of like a logic and a reasons from different way where you are connecting, and that kind of like triggers the afflictions. So now from the wisdom sense of self, okay, if like how we work, if we're going to do kind of like okay, this month before 2025 I want to work into this one. If you're kind of making some plan. So here from the wisdom perspective, sense of self, the first thing is constantly, intentionally, logically, kind of setting yourself to any time when I feel this kind of like a paranoia sense of self, I want to look not just the emotional aspect, but that kind of a concrete self I want to kind of dissolve. I want to kind of look into that one. I want to look behind the feelings and the symptoms of a grasping of self, and then looking into the kind of like a that kind of tight. We usually say I feel tight in the chest, or I feel kind of like a hurts in the middle of my chest. So anyway, these kind of like a element symptoms, but in the deep down, emotionally, psychologically, and then there's basically, when you're looking very carefully, there is a kind of like independent, inherent, something that's even independent from our aggregates, even independent. There's something that within us kind of like a permanent absolute. So anyway, what I'm saying over here is like we don't need to use these terminology and so on and so forth, but kind of like not just distracting with the symptoms that you feel, hurt, pain, tight. Go beyond that, where it is coming from, tight, painful, kind of like a heavy, and then looking into there, and like there is not just kind of like pay attention for the physical sensations, but trying to go beyond that, and then making intentionally, I want to release this. I need to kind of like relax that. I need to dissolve that. I need to, So usually what happens is we get distracted with the sensations related with due to the intense self-grasping, physical sensations. Then you're trying to kind of releasing physical sensation, that kind of tightness, gives some kind of relief. Then we kind of like, okay, I'm getting better. but we haven't really looked at it beyond the sensation, where is creating that kind of sensation, where that kind of like a fear, that kind of internally. So here, from the wisdom perspective, we be prepared all the time to, anytime when we feel that, we're willing to go beyond the sensation. Notice we're not trying to ignore the sensations of a physical tightness and that kind of all things, lung, Tibetan we say lung, but beyond that, I need to get more. I notice that, but there is a fundamental condition, cause or root cause, that called self-grasping. I need to really, and even in self-grasping, that's basically there is a sense of self, sometimes sense of self which is basically so lonely, so feel isolated, so feel, sometimes we can notice that kind of like isolation, disconnected, isolated and disconnected. But that's also, we are getting beyond the physical sensations of the self-grasping, but within the self there is a sense of isolation, lonely, very individual, very, very sadly individual, no interdependent, totally independent. Totally. So something that's so, sometimes in a Buddhist philosophy we use such as a self-sufficient. Although self-sufficient looks like a much more nicer, in reality self-isolated, so isolated. So now over here, this is a basically. Usually there is two layers. I feel this kind of like a self-isolation and self-sufficient. That kind of like a self-sufficient kind of sense of feeling coming from the self-isolation. There's a root of that is a self-isolation. And again, in the emotional experience, when we are in a very difficult situation, we not just self-sufficient, we go state of a self-isolation. So, like basically that means is like almost you almost sense of feeling of you are outcast from the existence. So there's no way but interdependent kind of way of thinking. And so now over here, basically, ideally, we need to prepare, we're not necessarily feeling that kind of like a self-isolated, self-disconnected. Not all the time we feel that, but there is, in a subconscious level, in a fundamental level, there is that kind of undercurrent. Because of that, we do feel self-paranoia, self-anxiety, all that things. So in a wisdom meditation, is trying to prepare all the time. That preparation also really purifies the grossest level of such as a self-sufficient grasping or self-paranoia, all this kind of like ups and downs relation with the self can be transformed by that kind of like a meditation of emptiness of a self. Okay, so that's, I think, emptiness of a self is basically you are taking, as I mentioned earlier, what is the not? Empty of intrinsic reality. Empty of intrinsic reality shows the nature of self. Okay? So, wisdom meditation, meditation of emptiness. Meditation of emptiness is basically again, that also affects, since it is related with the self awareness, is also like a, like for example, sometimes we say, why we do meditation of emptiness? Why we do meditation of emptiness? I think in a spiritual practice, in a spiritual journey, there's only one project. There's only one thing we are looking for. I would not necessarily say enlightenment, the liberation, not necessary. These are kind of like a painted version, more kind of like a decorated version. But fundamentally, in a spiritual practice, what really we're trying to do? More kind. Yeah, they are part of that. From my point of view, spiritual practitioner means basically job description is I want to make my mind clear, my spirit clear. So basically, that person is not thinking about so much about the material, is much more thinking into as a human being, our consciousness. I want to, house clean, sanitizing the consciousness. So basically, somehow spiritual practitioners' main focus becomes to how to make a mind, focus into go to the mind. Spiritual goes into the mind, and basically that journey, sometimes compassion. I think sometimes they too quick. I feel like we have already ideas and labels and compassion. I'm going to do loving kindness too quick, and that we lose the fundamental picture. Really the mind. I need to really pay attention to my mind. As a spiritual practitioner, I'm not trying to generate something. I will do 99% is to improve or transform a clarity of our mind, presentness of my mind, awakeness of my mind is a spiritual practitioner. And byproduct, and when you meet different cause and condition, compassion comes naturally, faith and devotion comes naturally. These are when the pure state of a mind, grounded state of a mind, when it meets with the different conditions, it have a compassion rises. I think we should not go immediately, I want to do compassion meditation. I think we should go first the fundamental spiritual practitioner as just the mind. So meditation about emptiness of a self is so strongly related with my operation or function of my mind. To me to kind of like having pure state of a mind, or really to able to create pure state of a mind, unpolluted state of a mind, clean mind. Like we talk lots of clean air, pure. Like we talk, that's lots. Similarly with the environmental things, inner environment. Our cognitive mind is to be in the state of a non-reactive, not kind of falling into the fear, kind of like a pollution, to get that. So therefore, meditation of emptiness of a self is the key ingredient to our spirit or our consciousness able to stay in the pure absence of fear, and so that's kind of like the meditation of emptiness. Why are we doing meditation of emptiness? That really helps healthy of our cognitive mind. Without the mind, we are just kind of like a frame. Just kind of nice frame. The mind, the consciousness, which makes difference. So therefore, meditation of emptiness. I'm doing meditation of emptiness. If we answer, I want to become enlightenment. These things is a right answer but also wrong answer. It's not really understood the question, I think. To really, not just kind of, sometimes question have so many, what you say in the question, but the meaning behind is so rich than just the statements of the question. So therefore, healthy awareness, cognitive mind, thought, all that thing is fundamentally from the, if these things, our thought arise from the knowing of true nature of my own self, that thought will be so powerful. Loving kindness arising from the knowing of a true nature of myself, that's so effective and powerful. Any kind of prayer and a dedication coming through that knowing true nature of myself, it becomes so true to our own self, those thoughts and prayers. So therefore, meditation of emptiness is all about pure awareness, to generating pure awareness, generating pure cognitive mind. For that reason, I think spiritual practitioners basically, from my point of view, the person who really wants to purifying our cognitive mind. Okay, so now sense of self, you kind of like, we might get kind of what have to do with the sense of self with a cognitive mind? There isn't that the sense of self is a part of a cognitive mind. We might get that kind of like a comparison, but somehow, now if we go much more deeper looking, self, what is a self? From a Buddhist point of view, is that we all know I or self. What is a self? What is a self? This physical, this brain, this energy, this awareness. If you go more further and further and further and further and further, so this is I think that lots of Buddhist philosophy, system of a Buddhist philosophy, I think may start from the searching of a nature of a self. Since it's, says there's no creation, so now that falls the responsibility naturally, philosophically, what is the self? Where is the self? And that natural kind of like a pushing. Now, in a Buddhist philosophical systems, there's quite a lot, say, trying to pinning down what is a self. Everybody have a temptation to, this is a self, this is a self. But most of them pointed something kind of energy or cognitive mind. They never pointed for physical at all. Everybody go beyond the physical. Self is something beyond the physical, and trying to point for something. This is I think this is a self. And again, from the Buddhist philosophically, the whole kind of evolved the understanding of a self is not just kind of also karma, concept of a karma, cause and effect. That kind of like ownership of our own actions, and the result, karmic concept. So in the Buddhist philosophy, when they're trying to understand the self, they really keep an eye into the karma constantly. It's not like what is the self, it's just kind of like not only from that point of view, also all the time self and the karma, like what's they're trying to understand the self through the karmic relation. So what is the basic, that means is something is a karmically accountability. Self is trying to identify and establish in the Buddhist philosophy when there's a self, karmically accountability self. Anything physical cannot be karmically accountability, because physical kind of diminish and kind of, so they have accountability require continuity. So from the Buddhist philosophical thinking, self means something continuity, something that liability. Am I become like kind of lawyer? Something.
It only means that if you have a mental health,
Huh?
if you have a mental health, unity is sort of like gone, right?
Yeah, even the mental, like for example, now, like for example, there's mind-only school. There's a sense of self is a consciousness, but they say there's one specific designated consciousness called Ether consciousness, Alaya Vijnana. And that consciousness is wide in this Buddhist philosophy thinking. Self means that consciousness, Ether consciousness. There's like the first 7 consciousness cannot be self because they fluctuated. They fluctuated too much, and there's no, how you say, continuity. So this mind-only school, this school said you have to have something accountability, continuity, which is becomes because it is accountability of a karmic cause and effect. So you have to have something that's beginningless, endless. Doesn't matter whatever karmic journey you take, but that underline is a consistency. It just goes through. So therefore, mind-only school, they say like not all consciousness, you have to have a specific designated consciousness called Alaya Vijnana. The word Alaya Vijnana, basically Tibetan word is a Kunshi. Basically that means basis of everything. Basis of everything. Basis of everything, fundamentally, it becomes a karmic basis. Anything we do in our life, it just leaves the fingerprint into that consciousness, pakcha, imprint, just constantly. Whatever we see, what hear, is different layers of, they're called edaka gunshi. So basically, what happening in our life, everything because of that imprint reaching with a different condition and a ripening, and what's happening in our life. Nothing is an accident. Everything is there is a inner condition, inner base and outer condition. So it's interacting with these things. So we have that fundamental base inside within us. So anyway, going back to the self.
I have
yes.
a question. Is our Buddha nature come along with this imprintable, like karma sensitive?
Perfect, yeah. Again, now, Buddha nature, this how you say, concept or the idea, all Buddhist philosophical thinking, and each comes with a slight different opinion. Again, based on a similar idea with a self, like something continuity, accountability, that kind of like so like for example, if I make a mainly kind of roughly summarizing, is one school will say Buddha nature is something propensity, potential within the us. In the consciousness we have that. That's a Buddha, and that comes from the beginningless. It just continue. So that kind of potential. And one school, Buddha nature is true nature of a mind is a Buddha nature. We don't have to go with the potential and propensity. Propensity is out of that true nature, then propensity can come. So one school say, what is my Buddha nature? Is my true nature of myself is my Buddha nature. And my true nature of myself, true nature of self is the Buddha nature. True nature or ultimate nature of self is the Buddha nature. So ultimate nature of a self is my ultimate nature of a self is my Buddha nature. When we're trying to establishing that another school, when we say that they don't have to do too much with the continuity and accountability and that kind of concept. Okay, so Buddha nature and self, so true nature of self. Now, ultimate nature of self, true nature of self. What is the ultimate nature of self and true nature of self? In this, again, when we kind of are looking true nature of self, is the not so much emptiness of self, but it is basically comes down to the like for example, for me, my primordial nature of mind, or clear light nature of mind, clear light nature of mind, basically the fundamental, the extreme subtle mind is the Buddha nature. Okay, go ahead.
So in terms of the Kunchi Namshi, the mind basis of all, mind-only school, from Prasangika viewpoint, would they say, oh yeah, conventionally that's a valid concept, but really it's just continuum of the mind, which is empty of inherent existence?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's exactly. Like for example, if we go more like a Pasankika, more advanced Buddhist thinker, they don't want to designate. They can label, but there's no, what is a self? If we ask that question, and then they will never point to consciousness or something. That they will never organize something to defining the advanced school, not trying to organize any system to defining self. Self is a merely imputed. Self is a merely imputed. Self is a something that we created, imputedly created. Sense of self imputedly, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It doesn't mean it's invalid. It's a valid. It is exist, but the way it exists doesn't require something to organize and construct and then doesn't. It is just kind of like a flow of energy, and you labeled, imputed into the flow of aggregate. You impute it, merely imputed the self, merely impute the self. Obviously, it doesn't really fit with how we feel, but it's kind of like if we able to ride into that awareness, merely imputed, it will open more opportunity than closing door for us. Merely imputed, it will be more. It will merely imputed sense of self will tear down all the discrimination and duality, rather than, it kind of like builds up. It usually, to defining self, we thought we had to require all these borders, the that kind of duality. Somehow duality helps to defining self. So merely labeled self, a sense of self, becomes spontaneously energetic rather than logically or psychologically, that kind of like a something much more, more flow with the cause and the condition, rather than trying to picking and controlling the cause and condition. It is a much more adapted way of integration with the nature of reality, rather than trying to controlling the nature of reality. So merely label self, sense of self, it is much more kind of like a disharmonious with the nature, rather than kind of editing the nature. Intrinsic sense of self creates the duality, and that's kind of tendency trying to edit it, the nature of existence. And there's no kind of like a naturally disharmonious. So therefore, merely label self, I think more accepting, more adaptable with the karmic cause and effect and the nature. So merely label self, merely label sense of self. It's much more merely label sense of self. I think it will be much more relaxed, not intimidation. Intrinsic self is very intimidating. Intimidation. Yeah. Okay. So, I think, fundamentally, basically, it's a kind of, it's complicated. We as a human being, we have a motivation, we have a vision, we have a dream, we want to create. And that's very important from even a wisdom point of view, wisdom practice point of view, that's very important. Now, when we have a lack of wisdom practice, very strong intention and motivation and a vision and a dream, basically what happens is a journey is not so much harmonious into the path. It's much more disharmonious into the path. So from the wisdom integration, basically into that kind of powerful motivation, and the wisdom will be much more, creates less obstacle for the journey to creating, to actualizing the dream through the wisdom practice. Basically that means there's a much more disharmonious with the journey to actualizing the motivation, the dream. Disharmonious in terms over here is basically it don't coming through. It's coming through much more kind of like adapted, much more flow, much more adapted, much more flow, and still making progress. Still making lots of progress without any kind of a sight damage. Okay, so therefore I think sometimes meditation of emptiness, merely level, looks like so passive. People might think that, but I think it might create so much more healthy process and journey to actualizing our powerful intentions, such as the bodhicitta and so on and so forth. Okay. So anyway, I went here and there. I'm sorry about. Let me go back. The Lojong, I said there's a two aspect. One is the dealing with the sense of self, okay, and the wisdom, the method and wisdom. Okay, Lojong. Okay, so now once we work that very well, once we work with that very well, once we work with the sense of us, we are really, once we graduate, once we feel some level of confidence, our own self, then slowly meditating and working into the compassion. Sometimes when you say, I'm going to do meditation compassion, is that we are unrealistic, overstating, basically. We are, am I, almost saying I want to fly to, I'm going to fly into the space. The things that, compassion, if there is a not good, healthy sense of self, compassion towards the self, how we can have a compassion for another living being? So therefore, is Lojong is one part is a majority work with how to create healthy sense of self. Majority goes there. Then on top of that foundation, then loving kindness, bodhicitta, exchanging self and another. All that, even Lojong meditation, the early part, early part of Lojong meditation is a whole kind of like a restructuring, re-educating, reintroducing sense of self, and really kind of getting that line up, in alignment, really good way, making that really kind of grounded. And then after you have in that foundation, then meditation in compassion. Meditation in compassion, it becomes like so important. So like, for example, if we're going to do a Lojong meditation, if you're going to do like a every day some session, early part of a session need to be really invested in the equanimity meditation and a sense of basically really grounding sense of self, not so much applying individual antidote which comes through the different afflictions. Oh, I get attachment, or I get like anger. Not trying to go individually, trying to applying antidote. That becomes endless, never finishing. So really, this all symptoms coming from behind those reaction thoughts and emotions, this is this sense of self. So we need to get there, and the Lojong practice is lots of training, understanding, doing homework, trying to understand our own self much more deeper, and really getting kind of like creating strong intention and awareness. I need to fundamentally to hold and kind of hold more compassionate way, much more gentle way, sense of self. And then the compassion meditation, the another part of the Lojong is compassion meditation. Nyingje. In the Tibetan word, this ning and je, ning means heart. Je means like a kind of like a something closeness. So literally means heart closeness, close heart, not close, very very dear heart. Okay, so what will be in English etymology of the compassion? Compassion. Coming from compassion. In Sanskrit, we're going back, karuna. The etymology of this word karuna is a seizing happiness. Devagopa. It's a kind of interesting to see seizing happiness. Basically means your own kind of like thinking all the time your own happiness. And compassion, karuna, etymology is like a seizing your own happiness, something like that. It's usually so. It is these terminologies. I think is created through observation of a self-cherishing. So basically, etymology of karuna, Sanskrit word, is seizing the self-cherishing. Is seizing the self-cherishing. That's kind of like although it says seizing the happiness, but it's referred to seizing the self-cherishing. Seizing the self-cherishing. So compassion, compassion need to obviously come through. If there is a high dosage of a self-cherishing, there's no way to kind of like generate compassion, because it doesn't really carry the definition. So therefore, sense of self, at least for certain extent, we haven't really eliminated, totally eradicated or transformed the self-cherishing or the self-grasping. Once we get to the self-caring, to then, when we are not lucky, then goes to the self-cherishing. Then we are so unlucky, then becomes a self-grasping. I think this fluctuation, self-grasping, and how much that self-grasping kind of influence lose the quality of a self-caring. You lose the genuine quality of self-caring. So So anyway, to go back to the so compassion. So compassion meditation requires this word ning je as a dearness, something. Usually when we feel empathy, you're much more focused into the unfortunate situation that happened, and you empathy. Okay, there is something, any kind of like a dearness and closeness in there? Not necessarily. You related, yes, you related with that experience. You are not related with that person. Does it make sense? What I'm saying? Empathy usually. So in a compassion, in a lojong, compassion is you are fully aware of the unfortunate situation, but your feeling and the connection is much more go with the person, that dearness, rather than that situation is a kind of sparking condition to create that. But the practitioner have a much more kind of like a focus and attention and kind of feeling related with the closeness with that person rather than the situation. So Ningje, and base, you are generating wish to free from suffering, not fooling from the, much more from the dearness feeling rather than the unfortunate situation. So usually sometimes we, wish to free from suffering, much from the situation, not so much the being, the sentient being. So that's, I think, the one thing, ning and je, ning, heartful, kind of like a closeness, dearness. So now, if we as an individual person, if we have a kind of like a strong sense of self-cherishing or self-grasping, there's no way to have that kind of like a dearness genuine, because it's naturally, it creates the separation and a duality, me and they, me and they more stronger, so therefore, I think the ultimate psychology is a sense of self. All the human problem, I think, even like a trauma. Now, from the, of course, it may happen through the past history, but the way to transforming is how we handle present self. The present self, if we able to kind of like maintain into much more healthy and more into kind of more into the self-caring in the present self, is naturally able to heal the past trauma. I think the sense of self, when the trauma happens due to the condition and situation, and our sense of self is all the time either past or either future, that kind of tired and not able to be into the present. And I think it becomes a perfect condition to not able to heal. Not able to. The healing basically means you are not forgetting, but you're able to let go. You're able to let go. You are not holding into that one. Healing means you're able to let go. When the sense of self is caught into the past, or sense of self caught, then you are holding. You're holding more further. You are not holding more further. So therefore, from the wisdom meditation point of view, the therapy will be much more going into the present moment, into the much more in a deeper, rather than, kind of. So I think there's, I think, again, maybe we need to do more kind of like creating clear methods to healing through the present and let going the past, and maybe that's if we are able to create kind of very simple and clear steps kind of like a leading and guiding through how to lay down the past and how to let go the past, step by step. It's not so much, it's not to forget, but it is this kind of like a grasping of a self. What is the grasping of a self is what that means, grasping of a self. Grasping of a self have so much, not so much what happened to self, but the self-identifying with what happened with the self. So therefore, I think so somehow bringing in our own self in the present awareness, present present moments of self. Basically that means, I will say, ultimately, meditation and emptiness of self. So okay, now there's a one story. There's a one great yogi. There's one great yogi, and there's one kind of like a one one village in Bhutan or somewhere. This one kind of like a minister, or a little bit more kind of like a wealthy or powerful person. He got sick, and then they wants to invite some teacher to do a ritual purification to removing obstacle. And this ritual takes for 3 days, and at the end the ritual you do like a bonfire and kind of remove the obstacle. There's a kind of usual standard traditional. So then the third day, everybody's prepared the bonfire and everybody's waiting. They're going to remove all the negative energy, but this master, they keep waiting, but this master's never coming out. And they ask him, "Hey, you have the time now? Everybody's ready. Used to time to come out." And he said, "No, I'm getting close to getting the obstacle. I'm very close to getting the obstacle." So then I think the powerful ruler, I think he's in the same compound in another room. So then then the time comes, you bring the kind of like it's a kind of soap, they make kind of ritual object. So then sometime later he brought it. And then he brought it, and he's taking that, and he's going all different directions. He's not coming to the way they're going to make a bonfire. So he's taking it, kind of pretending like a chasing. So he went, and then suddenly, he said, "I'm chasing that obstacle," Then he took that whole kind of like a substance, and then went to exactly the person who are in the bed. He threw on him instead of doing in the bonfire. And then obviously when he threw to him, he went through like, he got healed. This person got healed. Yeah, he's just like everybody's waiting and bonfire, and you just throw on the patient.
So he cleared away his self-grasping in that moment.
Exactly, that's and he said, "I got it. I got the obstacle and hit on the obstacle." Okay,